Okay, so the example I was given is in a test in which you have to complete a gap, and you have a definition like what is a tryptophan? A tryptophan is basically a closing diphthong plus schwa. If you do not spell diphthong in the right way, diphthong has, if I'm not mistaken, two DIPH, right? And then TH. If you forget one of the H, right, um, it, it assesses as wrong, as incorrect. The same thing if you misspell schwa. Schwa is usually spelled as SCHWA. Let's suppose that you forget the C and you just type SH like the one that I'm typing here in the chat. So the correct one is supposed to be the second one. So if you misspell the word, it's considered to be incorrect. The same thing if you add. For example, let's suppose that you write the schwa, but then you type the symbol. That's something new. It's like a new answer for the program. Even if you put a schwa in between brackets and a period, if you add that period, it's considered to be incorrect. So that is something that I learned, and that's why it took me a little bit more time, because I had to go and review each test individually to find out if there were misspelled words, because misspelling turns the answer to be incorrect. Okay, so that's that's something that I learned, because for next time, if we have fill in the gap exercises, I'm going to be very clear about the instructions, meaning I'm going to say take care of the spelling, right? Include only, I don't know, one word and no symbols. What else? And do not add any extra character. Okay, that's something. For example, if the answer was diphthong plus schwa, the using a plus like a symbol, like the one I wrote in the chat, turned out the answer to be incorrect. Okay, so that was really tricky. That's something that I have to improve in terms of the instructions, and from your perspective, you have to read carefully the instructions in a quiz or a test, so that next time it's not that complex, right? Because I don't want to skip a point and give you the full score. I'm working on the recordings, right? I have to say that I just had to start with one. I mean, I teach ELT 115, which is a course in first year, and I teach this one, which is phonetics in the second year, right? And since I just started with first year, I finished 3 sections, and I'm working on section 1. Yeah, I'm working with section 1, but I haven't finished with the speaking rubrics. So that's you're going to hear some news during this week. I think I'm going to be updating regularly. Some of you will receive news about your grades for the speaking component before, meaning I'm not going to finish until the last one to upload the PDF file. Okay, so probably not probably on Wednesday I'm going to upload a PDF file with the grades containing the speaking component. Okay, because the listening and writing are already in the Moodle. Okay, so you can find your grades for the listening and writing tests in the Moodle already, but the speaking tests, probably half of you will find it on Wednesday, and the rest, I would say, Friday or over the weekend. Okay. Any comments or questions that you might have? Okay, a quick review of concepts very quickly. I'm going to just we're going to browse some of the concepts. This was taken from the web. I'm going to upload this material to the LMS. And I'm going to ask a lot of participation from you. In this case, I'm going to ask Karen Rojas if you could read the slide. It says sound segments. Could you do it, Karen?
Sound segment. Knowing a language includes knowing the sounds of that language. Therefore, we are able to segment a continuous stream of speech into distinct parts and recognize the parts in other words. In other words, everyone who knows a language knows how to segment sentences into words and words into sounds. Phonetics is the study of speech sounds.
Thank you so much. So, segment a continuous stream of speech implies that you can divide, you can find the boundaries, right? Segment, a continuous stream of speech, etc. So when you hear someone, you can define you the possibility to understand by segmenting the information, the message from the speaker. If you're not able to segment, right, you hear only one long sentence, and if you're listening to someone speaking in a language that you don't know, if you hear someone speaking in, for example, Japanese, right, just to mention a language, we just hear a complete string or a continuous string of sounds, and we're not able to segment the message to know which one is the first word, which one is the last word of the utterance. Okay. Also, knowing a language implies that you're able to, for example, I can understand here continuous, and I'm sure you can as well, that the first sound is k, right? And the last sound is s. Now, in between, we can identify several sounds which belong to the categories of vowel sounds and consonant sounds, right? And that is something that knowing a language gives us, right? The ability to, in an utterance, understand which are the initial sounds and final sounds, and also in between words, which are the sounds that make up a word. Okay, and that's what phonetics deals with, right? Speech sounds that make up words and larger utterances. It's important that we understand that phonetics is a science, right? And that is subdivided into branches like, articulatory, auditory, and acoustic phonetics. By the way, articulatory, there will be, right, one concept. Acoustic, without a final S. Let me see if I can have it. Yeah, I have it right here. Acoustic, no S, and auditory, right, are the sub-branches that deal with sounds in different stages, right? And that's something that I would like one of you to read. For example, in Noshka, do you have a working microphone? Is your microphone working?
Yes, teacher.
Okay, could you read the slide, please?
Acoustic phonetics?
Yes.
Acoustic phonetics focuses on the physical properties of the sound of language, such as duration, frequency, and intensity of sounds. Auditory phonetics focuses on the perception of speech by the auditory system. And articulatory phonetics,
Mm-hmm.
focuses on how the vocal tract produces the sounds of language.
Exactly. Exactly. So these sub-branches of phonetics deal with different stages of the production, transmission, right, and the perception of the sounds. And that's connected with one concept, which is, right, the speech chain, right, in which, if you remember, we have speaker who, and there's a very interesting website that contains the information written in very interesting paragraphs, quite comprehensible. That in this website you can find, which is at the bottom, you can find a description of the speech chain, right? But in terms of the sub-branches of phonetics, we would say that that articulatory phonetics deals with the production, deals with the phase or stage in which sounds are being produced internally within what's the process that's called phonation, and it deals with what's happening within the oral cavity and with all the vocal tract, and even before with the lungs, because we need to remember that this process is a process in which air streams coming out of the lungs, so that's why it's called pulmonic, right? And the air leaves the body, so it's egressive, right? Pulmonic and egressive energy leaving your body. That's something that we need to consider, because in other languages, some sounds are produced by an ingressive flow of air, meaning that the sounds are produced while the airstream is going into the system. And also in other languages, not English, some sounds are not produced necessarily with the air coming from the lungs, right? But they are produced in a different area of the vocal tract, such as the velum, right? So in general terms, when we communicate in English or Spanish, for instance, we're using pulmonic airstream, and it's in an egressive way. That would be the natural form for us. And when the air leaves the body, it leaves the body as sound waves, which are transmitted, reaching everywhere, right? In a specific radio. And then this is something that is dealt with by the acoustic phonetics, that measures, right, through spectrograms or through technology that can measure and classify sound waves. And then auditory phonetics, which deals with the way in which the sounds are perceived, because we take it for granted that everyone perceives sounds equally, but remember that we are born with different capacities, and we can hear things in different ways. And actually, that's something that is quite interesting for teachers of English, because we need to understand that in order for someone to understand a sound, that person needs to be exposed to a sound before. Because if you hear some sounds that you have not been exposed to before, you tend to match them with the inventory that you have in your brain. So, for example, if you haven't been exposed to an interdental sound, and you have never heard a word starting with, for example, thanks, or though, or they, you tend to associate it with a sound that you know, that you have in your own inventory, linguistic inventory, like Spanish. Okay, so that's why we tend to mispronounce sounds at the beginning if you're not explaining how to produce those sounds. Okay, so that's something that the auditory phonetics, which is associated with the other disciplines like, psychology and other sciences, they give us clues about how we can improve the understanding of the message from the point of view of auditory phonetics. So this is an interesting process, right? That we need to be conscious or aware of as teachers of English. Now, there's some information here in the slide that I would like one of you to read. Let's ask Daniel Duque. Are you here, Daniel? Daniel? Maybe I got you in your coffee break. No, just kidding. Valentina Fuentes, are you here? I have to warn you that I'm going to keep talking, but at some point I'm going to stop to ask you to jump into the conversation. Valentina, can you take care of this slide, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
The phonetic alphabet. Spelling or orthography does not consistently represent the sounds of language. Some problems with ordinary spelling. The same sound may be represented by many letters or combination of letters. People, key, believe, says, machine, Cesar sees, see, and boa. The same letter may represent a variety of sounds. Father, village, badly, made, many.
All right, thanks so much, Valentina. So that is an issue that spelling does not, or orthography, right, does not help us to understand how a letter is pronounced or a grapheme is pronounced. We don't have this one-to-one match like we do in Spanish, in which in general, right, in general, we have this grapheme, and we have the same sound, E, in Spanish, right? So spelling is something that is really tricky in English. For example, the same sound may be represented by many letters. So for example, the sound E, or if you prefer, right, E, can be represented by this grapheme, this, right? Here's a combination of two letters, believe, sees, machine, Caesar, sees, see, and amida, right? So if you take a look at the possible combination of letters or individual letters, we have here different types of spelling, and we have the same sound, E. Okay, so that's one difficulty about learning English, that the same sound may be represented by many letters or a combination of letters. So this is a good answer for someone that asks you, is English a difficult language to learn? Well, you could say yes, or you could say no, but this is one good argument, right? The same sound can be represented by many letters. So spelling, right? In English, spelling is not there. There isn't a one-to-one correspondence, right? When you are associating a letter and a sound, probably in English, in Spanish, but not in English. And the second point read by Valentina, the same letter may represent a variety of sound. The same letter as a, 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 actually turns out to be father, right? Village, badly, made, and many. So as you can see, the same grapheme, the same letter, with different sounds, right? Father, village, badly, made, and many. I'm sorry, this is supposed to be diphthong, right? Much better there. Okay, so here we have two issues with the phonetic, concerning the phonetic alphabet, right? Why is the phonetic alphabet necessary? The next slide, I would like to divide it into two. We have 3, 4, 5, and 6. So 3 and 4 for one person, right? One participant, right? And 5 and 6 for another one. So Viviana, can you take the first two? Margaret, can you take the next two, please?
Yes.
Thanks so
Yes.
much. All right, wonderful.
I start.
Yes, please.
Okay. 3. A combination of letters may represent a single sound. 2 character tones, either physics, roads, code, deal. 4. A single letter may represent a combination of sounds. Retrocts.
Thank you so much.
Some letters in a word may not be pronounced at all. Autumn, sword, resign. I don't know how to pronounce that word.
Okay.
Lamb, carbs, psychology, right not. There may be no letter to represent a sound that occurs in a word. Could use.
All right, thanks so much. So number 3, it says combination of letters may represent a single sound. A combination of letters. For example, should, we have a combination of letters here. Should to represent one sound, which is sh, right? Sh, and which can be represented by this symbol, right? Sh. Here we have a combination of C and H, which is represented by the symbol k, right? Character. Here we have a connection, the combination of TH, it's 2 here, 2 here, 2. I have no idea with this one. I guess it's this, right? So we have K character, we have T, Thomas, we have either, we have physics, we have rough, we have coat, and we have deal. Okay, so we have a combination of 2 letters which represent one single sound here. 2 letters, one single sound. Okay, not like in Spanish or other languages in which each individual sound it represents one letter. Okay, in the number 4, read by Viviana, a single letter may represent a combination of sounds. Xerox, which is a trademark, right? Xerox, that turned out to be an action, right? Xerox. It's like to photocopy, right? Just like when we say confort, right? We talk about confort. I confort en el baño. Confort, which is a trademark, right? And it's actually papel higiénico. Xerox turned out to be from a trademark into an action. Xerox, to photocopy. And Xerox may represent, if I'm not mistaken, Xerox. It's like exception. This letter may may represent a combination of 2 sounds. Exception. Okay, this is a representation in terms of phonemic symbols of this grapheme. Okay. Number 5, read by Margaret, said some letters in a word may not be pronounced at all. Autumn, I guess this one is not pronounced, is it?
I think.
Is it the M or the N?
Atom. The N is not pronounced.
Okay. What about this one?
It's sword, actually.
Sword. So this one is not pronounced?
No.
Okay. What about the here?
Resigned.
Resigned. So I guess this one?
Yes.
Okay. And the following, which one is not pronounced?
P.
Okay. And the next one?
B.
Okay. And here?
I don't know.
Anyone knows?
Letter R.
R.
This one?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. What about this one?
P.
E.
This one?
The letter E.
W.
Which letter?
W.
W, all
Right.
right. And this one?
Key.
Okay.
K.
Yes, so the K is not pronounced. We say not. All right. And there may be no letter in F6. There may be no letter to represent a sound that occurs in a word. Use. Which is a sound that is not here, or the letter that is not here to represent a sound?
E.
E like E?
No.
Letter E.
Letter E. Yes.
The letter E. Okay, so we're talking about this one. Yes?
Exactly.
Yes.
All right. All right. So we are facing here some issues in terms of the language, in which we see that there is no one-to-one correspondence. Sometimes we have some letters that are not pronounced. I guess we have the same thing in Spanish with the letter H when we say hola, right? We have a silent H at the beginning. So some languages have that particular relationship in which some graphemes are not actually produced, right? And sometimes one symbol or one letter is represented by two sounds, like the X, right, which is usually produced by the combination of K and S. So these are issues that we need to take into consideration when we're learning a language and when we're teaching a language, that these phenomena does not necessarily occur in our mother tongue. That's why in 1888, right, the International Phonetic Association created the International Phonetic Alphabet. So the idea was to create a system, a reliable system in which you can find a one-to-one correspondence between a sound and a symbol. Okay, so the International Phonetic Alphabet is one system among other systems that tries to create this one-to-one correspondence between sounds and symbols, so that but not only for English, right? IPA is used for by linguists in different countries in the world to understand sounds in any language. Okay, that's important to remember, in any language. Okay, let's hear a male voice now. Anyone interested? Carlos, would you like to read? Do you have a working microphone?
Yes.
Okay. Carlos, could you read the slide, please?
Mhm. Consonants, place of articulation. Consonants are sounds produced with some restriction or closure in the vocal tract. Consonants are classified based in part on where in the vocal tract the airflow is being restricted, the place of articulation. The major places of articulation are bilabial, labiodental, interdental, alveolar, palatal, I vel- velar, uvular, and glottal.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you, Carlos.
You're welcome, teacher.
So remember that we talked about vowel sounds first, and then we started talking about consonants. In general, when we are producing vowel sounds, there's no restriction, and the airflow flows freely, right? The airstream goes from the lungs out, right, in an aggressive way, as I mentioned before, without major restrictions or obstructions. But when we talk about consonants, we need to talk about a range of different degrees of restrictions, right? Sometimes the airflow is stopped completely and then released with a sudden implosion. Sometimes the restriction it just creates some sort of friction in some area of the vocal tract, specifically in or more specific in the oral cavity, right? And sometimes it's a combination of stopping the airflow and then releasing gradually the airflow. That is something that we need to keep in mind when we're dealing and classifying consonant sounds. Um, and that so before we used like 5 or 6 criteria to classify vowel sounds. Um, if you remember, we talked about the length of the vowel sound, right? We talked about the height in terms of where the tongue was in the oral cavity, the position of the tongue or the backness, right? We talked about the lips, if they were rounded or not, and we talked about the tension of the lips when we were producing the sounds. It gets a little bit more simple when we describe consonant sounds because we just use 3 criteria: manner of articulation, place of articulation, and voicing. And I think we started talking about this before. I think that we talked about the different places of articulation except uvular. I think we talked about bilabial, labiodental, interdental, alveolar, palatal, velar, and glottal. If I'm mistaken, please correct me at any moment, okay? And and we started talking about place of articulation as one of the things that we need to take into consideration to be able to produce the sound correctly. Okay. Okay, here we have a diagram that is not very clear, but it contains some of the concepts mentioned before in terms of place of articulation: bilabial, labiodental, interdental, etc., etc., etc. Okay. We talked about place of articulation. We have 3 categories here, and I would like to ask Pancho Zamorano if you could read Pancho this slide here in front of you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Consonants, place of articulation. Bilabials, produced by bringing both lips together. Labiodentals.
Oh, you forgot the brackets. Sorry.
Okay, okay, sorry. Bilabials, produced by bringing both lips together. Labiodentals, produced by touching the bottom lip to the upper teeth. Interdentals, produced by putting the up of the of the tongue between the teeth. The teeth. The teeth. Ah, that's
That's all right. Teeth.
teeth.
Pancho, there's one mistake in the last one. Which is the mistake?
The the first symbol.
Okay.
Didn't it? But
You mean this one? You mean this one?
yeah, no,
No,
yes.
this is correct. This is correct. There's one mistake in this section.
I don't know. I didn't say a word.
No, you read this wonderfully. But I made a mistake.
Ah, okay.
So anyone can identify
tip.
the mistake? Exactly, the tip. Wonderful, good.
Okay.
All right. I did not do this on purpose. All right, it's my mistake. I think it's a good way, though. I'm just thinking aloud now. It's a good way to see if the message is being understood. But yes, I made a mistake here. Tip of the tongue. Exactly. Do you have a question about this section? Does anyone have a comment? Anything?
I think that's clear.
All right. I remember in my college years, long time ago, that I found these two very intriguing, very complex. I mean, it was really hard for me to understand the relationship between a symbol like this. Sorry about the mess, and connected with, for example, the initial sound in think, and also try to connect this symbol with, for example, they. And I remember when I was in the university that it was really hard for me to understand why the symbol represented the voiceless interdental, right, fricative, and this symbol represented as in they, also interdental, also fricative, but then the only difference was that this one was voiced, right? It was very difficult for me to understand the concepts. I consider them very abstract. Okay, that's why I was asking you for because if you consider p, b, and are in Spanish, f and v are in Spanish, but we do not have these two in Spanish, and they are different. I mean, so I remember that in college or in my university years, it was quite complex for me to understand the difference. And that's why I was asking you. Okay, we're going to finish the session now. This was a sort of a review for. I mean, not to add more pressure. We're just starting. Thank you for all of you who connected and the ones who participated actively in reading aloud some of the slides. Remember that next time we meet, we're going to finish some of these review. Okay, I'm going to upload this presentation. I strongly suggest you to take a look at this website at the bottom. And I think I have it open here, which is, yes, it's this one. Particularly, take a look at the section called the speech chain.
Teacher,
Yes, sir.
we're still seeing the presentation.
Thank you for that. I'm going to.
You are right. Now we are seeing the speech chain.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for the feedback. So going back, It looks like this, okay? And if you scroll down, you may start here from this diagram, and it's very simple in general terms, right? So you can understand the process that goes on when someone speaks up to when someone listens to the message. If you are taking linguistics at some point, I think next year, this is going to be a lot of help, okay? Because this is one of the concepts that I'm going to copy and paste actually this website link in the chat for you to have it in case you're very anxious and you want to take a look at it right now. Okay, so that's the last thing I would like to say. Speech communication here, number 4, is something you cover in linguistics. That, we're not going into this in detail, but I strongly suggest that you take a look at this because, you know, it goes on giving a very detailed explanation about what goes on during the speech chain. Okay, so take a look at this, and I will see you on Tuesday, hopefully tomorrow at the same time. All right, so any comments or questions before we finish the session?
No, teacher.
No?
No.
All righty, so I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good day.
Right, see you.
Thank
Take care.
you.